All right, thank you everybody for coming out tonight to our general membership meeting. Tonight we're going to be discussing setting rental criteria, and then Megan from Western Reporting will be going over how to evaluate a credit history. So we're going to talk about that. But let's launch in real quick. First, why you need a written rental criteria. How many of you use a written criteria that you've sat down and worked out? Okay, good. That's important to have. The first reason to have that is so that you avoid any appearance of unfairness. You're completely impartial. You sit down and you say, if somebody does X, Y, Z, then that means that they are a qualified tenant, somebody that I will rent to. Then you just take it, and if you have a high enough criteria, the first person that meets that criteria, that's the person you're going to rent it to. And it keeps you from getting desperate. So if you can't find a tenant, and along finally comes some guy and he gets in there and he's horrible, but you're like, oh, maybe I should just rent to him anyway. This is going to keep you honest and keep it professional, so you don't rent to him and then regret it 3 months later when you have to evict him. All right? So that's one of the first reasons to have a written criteria, is to make you avoid the appearance of unfairness, and also to keep you professional and make it so that you remember this is the standards that you're setting. Now, from time to time, you're going to come across something that's going to make you uncomfortable. You're going to say, well, in my written criteria, I didn't include this, but now that I've actually met a potential applicant who does have this problem on their history or this condition, well, gee, I might want to include that. I'm speaking to a member today who has said that they've had a tenant who they've had problems with because they can never get a hold of them. And he said, I'm going to put on my rental criteria that I require that they have a cell phone. Now, you don't have to do that. And if you have a lower income, a lower price rental, that might be difficult. But you can put that on your rental criteria. There's nothing that says that's illegal. You're welcome to say you have to have a phone number that I can contact you at. Sure, that's what you want. So you look at your rental criteria and you see what you want in a tenant. Okay, so there are some certain things that you should absolutely include in your rental criteria. All right, these are things like having a criminal record that does not include whatever makes you uncomfortable. So, for example, an arsonist might be a fine person. I might be willing to sit on the bus next to him, but I would certainly never rent to somebody who's convicted of burning down a building. That might be a very bad thing as a landlord. I don't think I would ever rent to somebody who's been convicted of killing a previous landlord. Things like that. So what criminal history is going to make it so you will not rent to them? Put that on there. Same thing goes for a credit history. You say, I'm not going to rent to anybody who owes a previous landlord money. That's a pretty good one. But you're going to have to evaluate what your standards are in that. Another one that is very common and important is employment. So you want to be able to verify that they have employment, but a lot of people will require that they've been at the same job for at least, say, 3 months or 6 months, whatever you require, so that they can demonstrate that they have a stable job and a steady income. Because you don't want to get a tenant in there who has a great income, can pay the rent, and then loses that job 2 weeks after they move in, and then you have to kick them out. So those are kinds of things that you should include. You should also include what your criteria are for animals. So like pets, things like that, what you're going to do with that, what your criteria are going to be for size. So if you have a 3-bedroom apartment, you should at least allow 6 people to live there, but you can say I don't allow more than, say, 8 people to live in this apartment, etc., etc. Now, if you own multiple units, you might also want to consider writing a separate criteria for each unit. You're going to have a very different criteria for a studio apartment that you charge $700 a month rent for, and a 6-bedroom house that you charge $2,000 a month for, You're going to have a very different criteria for those things, so you might want to consider writing a separate criteria for each one. Now, what do you do with this criteria? You use it to evaluate the applicants. First thing you should do is be straightforward. Hand the tenant the criteria and say, hey, look, if you meet these standards, I will rent to you. You give it to them and they read it and they go, okay, never mind, thank you very much. They don't want to waste their application money. They don't want to waste their time looking for an apartment. If they know they're not going to qualify, most of the time, they're going to leave. So that's the first thing. What does the tenant tell you on their application? And that's the first step you do. You take their application. Well, actually, the first step is you give it to them and let them evaluate themselves. And then if they think they are going to pass that criteria, you take their application and you read it. You'll save yourself some time and some energy. I don't know how many times you get a landlord who calls back and says, well, when I read the credit report, I didn't even look. And then I looked on there and it said they were going through a bankruptcy right now. So read the application. It's going to tell you in the application what's going on, all right? The other reason to read it is to check and see if they're being honest. I would say somebody lying on their application is an automatic reason to deny them. Even if they have been honest and you would have accepted them because of whatever the issue had been, if they lie on the application, that's a really bad foot to start off this relationship with your tenant. So, when you actually do run the checks, there are 5 things that you should evaluate, or that you should do as part of the check. First, you should check their credit history. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. Second thing you should do is check their criminal history. And this is going to be a criminal background report that you'll get, and it will show several things on it. The third is their employment verification, and this is important. Unfortunately, it's getting more difficult. Yes?
On criminal history,
Yeah.
someone might not have a conviction, but they might have been charged multiple times. But, wife drops the, domestic abuse suit. So how would you word a criteria to exclude people with certain criminal criteria and or
You can say
They
has
haven't
not been
necessarily
you,
conviction.
that you have not been. A standard language is you have not been charged or convicted of a serious crime against a person or property within the last X number of years.
Okay.
And some cities, most of you are probably in a city with a good landlord program, will actually set a limit and say you can't rent to somebody who has had a serious conviction or conviction within the last 4 years. But you can expand that as much as you want.
But can you choose what you feel comfortable with, or
Yeah.
is there a certain limit that you have to accept?
For the cities with good landlords?
Well, no, just, in general, because I know there's all this, equal housing opportunity. But for criminal history, is there some standard, or is it just whatever you feel comfortable
Whatever
with?
you feel comfortable with.
Okay.
The cities may set a floor and say you cannot rent to somebody who's had these crimes in this number of years. But if you want to say, I'm not comfortable renting to anybody who has committed a sexual crime ever, that is entirely up to you. Criminals are not a protected class in any way, shape, or form. So
Yeah.
even if somebody is part of another protected class, you're denying them because of their criminal history. In fact, if somebody is on the sex offender registry, I would recommend strongly that you think very long and hard before renting to them. Because if you rent to them in a house, the neighbors are not going to like you for renting to that person. And if you rent to them in a fourplex, now filling those other 3 units is going to be very difficult. So that's one thing to think about.
One time I had several school teachers living in 18
Uh-huh.
units, and they called and said, what are you renting to a sexual predator for? And I said, I'm not. That apartment has an older woman living there. Her son had listed her address,
Okay.
and so
Yeah.
and she had no idea. So, I quickly got that removed. It's like, you make sure my address is not shown as renting to that person. So you have to so I kind of go online now and check to make sure somebody hasn't posted one of my addresses, because I never rented to somebody, but I had 2 people both
Yeah.
checked it regularly.
Yeah, that is important to be vigilant about that. How did you get it removed?
I just told the lady that she needed to talk to her son and change that. She had so many, you have 1 week to get that done. I need to see a letter showing that it was done. And she got it taken care
Oh,
of.
good.
And then I looked.
Another quick bit of information, internet information that I found that's free, and they try to get you to spend money, but you don't have to. Whenever I get an applicant, there's a online, you go to mugshots.com if you don't know about it. And anybody that's ever had a mugshot is on there. And you might see the nice little old quiet guy. I had a quiet guy that wanted, and I put one on mugshots.com. He had a rap sheet 6 pages long.
Wow.
But it's free, and you know, you just kind of, as you're doing your application, it's not a bad thing to have.
That's a good thing to look at. You have to be careful. Some of those sites, where they make their money is they put the mug shots up, and then if you want your mug shot taken down, you pay them.
That's the way.
That's the way they make all the good money.
But you know.
So you have to be careful. But if they're on there, that means there's a problem.
Right.
But just because they're not on there doesn't mean you don't have
That's
a problem.
true. That's
Well, then it's not foolproof if they can get it off.
They can get it off that website. That's why you do a criminal check through a reputable company like Western Reporting that does it for us.
That too, but-
And that they can't get it off of there. The only way to get it off there is go to a judge and get the judge to remove it. Usually that's because they overturn the conviction or certain other circumstances. But that's the only way that a criminal record done through a reputable company can be removed.
But this just is a before.
Yeah,
you
this is,
run
if they
the-
want to just do
before
this
you run
easy
the
one first,
application.
like I said, if it turns out there's a problem on that, that means there's a problem. But just because there's not a problem on there, doesn't mean that you're scot-free.
I didn't quite understand this first lady, how she caught that.
I have 2 elementary school teachers living there, so they on a regular basis, they look at the sexual predator list. So and it shows, you know, you put in your home address, so it showed somebody living in the building next door to her. And she says, I thought you did criminal checks, why are you renting to a sexual predator? I said, I'm not. She said, it says apartment number 2 is registered to that address, and it was actually his mother.
Yep.
He wasn't living there, but he registered with
His mother's address.
his mother's address
Oh.
for the registry. So he was giving them faulty information. So I believe I called the registry. I told the mom she had to get that removed, otherwise I was evicting her.
Yeah.
Because my teacher said, we will move.
Uh-huh.
Right.
What's the cost on going to Western Reporting?
It's the $25. If you remember, it's $25 for a combined credit and criminal background check. And you can charge your applicants for that. So you pass the fee straight on to them. So they pay you, and then you pay, and you get it done. And then you check and you see. So that's for the credit and criminal. The other ones you have to do on your own. But that's important. Now I was going to go back to the sex offender registry. You want to check that regularly anyway. There have been people who have had mistaken, where a number gets transposed by somebody, and so instead of 989, it's 998, and then suddenly they're on your property and listed there, and have never lived there. So you want to be careful and check that one. Yes.
Do they have to be a citizen of the United States?
To rent from you?
Yeah, I mean.
Oh, no.
I mean, is it the law?
No. So you can have a non-citizen rent from you with no problem whatsoever if they, now you're not supposed to under state law rent to somebody who is here illegally. But people who are here legally, and there are lots of people who are here legally, that's not a problem at all. You're under no obligation to check, however.
But illegal is.
Yeah, you're not
Are
supposed
you
to.
asking though if that can be a criteria? Can you say you must be a US citizen as a criteria?
That's a very good question. One of the 7 federally protected classes is you can't discriminate based on national origin.
And that pushing it.
Yeah, that's pushing it, because if somebody's a legal immigrant from England or Germany, there's going to be you're probably not even going to notice sometimes. Whereas if they're from India or Africa, you are going to maybe think about it more. So you could put it as a criteria possibly, but that's right on the line.
Well, it doesn't have to be national origin. It would be, are you a legal citizen?
Yeah. So are you
Is
a
that a
U.S. citizen?
legitimate criteria?
Sure. You could say, are you a U.S. citizen and only rent to U.S. citizens? It would be better if you put, are you a legal U.S. resident? Because you'll have a lot of foreign students who come here. We have a couple wonderful universities that draw people from all over the world. And they come here and they need housing to stay in. And so they're often fantastic records.
I rented green cards. They're legal aliens. So,
Yeah.
and so they're not citizens, but they're legal.
Yeah. Somebody has a green card, they are legally here. The government knows about it, they've come here, they're working for a period, they may be in the process of becoming a citizen. You have,
So
they'll be.
green card could be a criteria.
Yeah, you say, you have to be here legally, which means either be a citizen or have a green card.
Well, during the Olympics, I rented to Canadians that were here for the Olympics.
Mhm.
They won 5 months, and I made them do a 6-month lease for more money because I couldn't get a year, but they were excellent renters, so.
Yeah, that might be a really hard one to catch.
Well, I mean, they definitely were not citizens, but They were here on the Canadian Olympic Committee.
Yeah.
Do they have to have a social security number?
To do a credit check, you need either a social security number or a tax ID number, right?
Not exactly. If they're Canadian, we can run a Canadian credit report. However, if they are not from Canada or not from the United States, generally getting a credit report per se, if they're not from one of those two countries, is quite difficult. However, that does not mean that you cannot do a criminal check from someone who is outside of the country. So just because they're coming from outside of the country, you can still do a criminal check. Now, the price on that does vary, and it does, the time it takes to actually do one does vary by country, simply because there's no regulation on, hey, okay, you know, Mexico's going to take this long, Germany's going to take this long, and everybody has the same price point. So that is going to somewhat vary, but you can do a criminal check on on an international basis.
Right. And as far as the cities are concerned, when they make you do a credit criminal check, they just want to ensure that they have not committed a crime in the United States. But you're welcome to do a criminal background check in the previous country. And then as far as the tax ID numbers, if they're not a citizen, the IRS will still give them a number. It starts with the number 9. And it functions exactly like a social, except for they don't get Social Security benefits. So they can apply for
I-9.
Yeah, it's an ITIN number or an I-9 number. And so they can use that to apply for bank accounts, get credit cards, and to get a credit history. So, any other questions? Yes.
I just rented this last week to a girl born in, she lived in Dubai.
Uh-huh.
And so I ran her credit criminal check, and it said no social security number listed.
Right.
So I asked her to send me a copy, and she had a card, but it was for work only approved by Homeland Security Administration, which was really quite odd to me.
Well, that just means that she hasn't done anything with it as far as getting a bank account or doing anything credit-wise. So it's the same as if somebody has a social and it comes back with no credit. We'll talk about that.
But it said it was, I had to, anyway. So I saw her green card and got off, but that kind of threw me for a loop because it said social security number was not registered with that social
Right.
security.
Right, because it's not a social, it's an IRS issued number, not a
Yeah.
Social Security
Yeah.
Administration. But these are hopefully exceptions, but you will come across things like that from time to time. All right? So, any other questions on these first two? And we will be talking about the credit reports extensively in just a moment.
I was just wondering, does the UAA have sample rental criteria?
We do have some if you'd like to grab on the way out. This is just a very brief and basic sample one. We'll be happy to provide to you if you'd like. And then you can use that, but you'll want, that's like I said, that's just a brief explanation of what one should look like. You'll want to set your own criteria, okay? Any other questions? All right. Employment verification is extremely important, but increasingly difficult. Employers are so scared of getting sued that all they will do is say, yes, they work here. They won't tell you how much money they make, they won't tell you how long they've been there, et cetera, et cetera. So the way around that is to ask for a pay stub. So you ask for a pay stub and for their phone number for their boss and call their boss because you want to do both. I talked to a landlord 2 weeks ago who said that they got the pay stub and it was from a couple weeks ago, it looked fine, and then they rented the person and then they never started not getting money ever, and they finally called the boss because they were trying to get a hold of the tenant, couldn't, and the boss said, oh no, we fired them a week before the day you said they moved in. So you want to confirm that they're employed and also confirm how much money they make and all those other things, and you can do that, how long they've been there with them.
And you want to have a stub that shows year-to-date earnings so you can tell that they did work the period that they said. Because I got a stub, that same girl gave me a stub that didn't have year-to-date earnings. So I said I have to see one so I know that, yes, you have actually gotten paid this for 8 months.
Right.
You know, so
And-
they had to run a different one off the computer to give me that.
Yep, and I've known landlords who in January or February will say, I need a current stub and a stub from December, or your tax returns from December, or your tax information from December. So that's entirely acceptable.
I just had someone that said they were self-employed, so I asked to verify their income tax records.
Perfectly
She
simple.
said, well, I'm going through a divorce and my husband filed the taxes. Well, when she had when her check, her security deposit bounced and her first month's rent bounced, I knew she was no good and she had no job. So I got rid of her.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
She couldn't prove anything.
exactly. I wouldn't have rented to her in the first place.
Yeah.
One good one is bank statements.
Sure.
2 of them are 3 months previous bank statements. One, it verifies that they're telling the truth, shows you if they have any money. If they said they make this much a month, it should have gone in the bank. And it's kind of like, why didn't it?
Yeah.
That's a strong one, I think.
Yeah.
If they say, no, I won't show you anything. More times people say, no, I won't show you things. That's when I'd say, well, then great. Have a good day. Bye.
Exactly, yeah, exactly. So it's employment, and it's really also income verification, as much as employment verification. You want to ensure that they have a steady stream of income. If they have Social Security, obviously they can provide that to you. If they have disability checks, child support, some sort of income, but you want to verify the income. Because they'll say, oh yeah, I make that much money, and they might not be telling the truth.
How do you verify alimony and child support?
Um,
You're not allowed to discriminate against source of income, right?
Yeah, source of income, you can discriminate against amount of income, but not source.
Right. Okay.
But you just ask for some sort of letter, or some sort of check stub, or even the bank record showing they get a regular deposit of X amount of money every month on the 3rd, or whatever it is.
How about a divorce decree?
That would work.
Yeah, all right.
That
Yeah.
doesn't mean they're getting it though.
Yeah, it doesn't mean they're getting it,
It
but.
doesn't mean anything.
That's true.
True,
I would
true.
go with a bank
The
statement.
1040 will be the best basis that they got it.
Okay. So yeah, you can request that. Ask your accountant. Yes.
If they're military, generally that comes out of their pay stub or out of their check automatically for the support, to go to, the husband or the wife or whoever it is. Also, if it is going through to coming from, the child support or the state, and pulling out of their check automatically, the parent actually can log in usually through the state website and pull up that income and present it that way. So there are a couple ways there.
I didn't know that. Thank you. Any other questions about income verification? All right. Previous landlord reference.
They'll give you a friend of the previous landlord.
Okay.
Or
That's why you get
they
two.
tell them they live with their parents.
Yeah.
All right.
Verify.
One way around that one, on their credit report, it will show some of their addresses.
Yeah, you check out the address they don't write on their application. I learned that.
Yeah. Now that doesn't necessarily mean 100%, but that's a good indication. That might be a good place to start. But yeah, they'll give you their friend. So coming up with 2 friends who can fake it for them, it's a little bit harder. That's why we put 2 down here. But with the previous landlord, it's important that you ask objective rather than subjective questions, okay? So sit there with your criteria and say, okay, one of my criteria is that they must have been employed for at least 3 months. Ask the landlord, were they employed while they were working or renting from you? Did they pay on time? That's a good one. Did they have any pets? How many people were living there? Did they throw loud parties? Objective yes or no questions are good, but other things that are good are anything that's not your
I
criteria.
rent the homes and I put down that you will be willing to maintain the yard, mow it, and keep the walks clean, and any violations of anything, you pay for it. And they have to sign for it.
Yeah, exactly. And so when you call him, attend one of his previous tenants, ask him, did they clean the walks? Did they mow the lawn? Did they do
A lot of
everything?
people say, yeah, sure, and then when it snows, I get a violation.
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
I've learned to document for that.
yeah.
I got an interesting one from another landlord out there the other day, and that says, would you rent to them again?
That is a difficult question. That's one we would really strongly recommend you don't ask,
Okay.
for 2 reasons.
Someone from the Callaway,
Yeah.
there's only about 600 units that they've done, so.
Well, I would say you don't ask that for 2 reasons. First, their standards are going to be completely different than yours. So they may have incredibly low standards, and they say, yeah, sure, I'd rent to them again. That doesn't mean that you should rent to them necessarily, because they may have really low standards. On the other end of it, it may be something personal. Maybe this person constantly beat them at poker every week that they played with them, so they hate their guts, and they would never rent to them, even though they're a great renter. Or maybe this person didn't bring a present to their wedding when they came, so they hate them, so they're not going to rent to them. But they still might be a good renter for you.
My favorite question to ask the previous landlord is, how many times were they late paying their rent?
That's a very good one.
It usually takes it aback just a little bit, and it's, you know, if it's a planted person, if it's a friend, that kind of comes out if you ask the right questions.
That's also, yeah, like you mentioned about plants. If you ask very specific questions, it's going to pull things out and say, well, what was the address again? Hey, and you know, you can even plug and say, hey, so how much do you charge in rent down there? You know, just talk friendly about landlord stuff. You're going to catch somebody who's faking real quick. So, yeah. And like I said, go to the landlord before that. Occasionally landlords are mean to each other, and none of you would do this, but sometimes the landlord is so desperate to get rid of somebody, they'll say, oh yeah, they were great tenant. So that's why we recommend giving to them.
I'm too honest, I just tell them the way it is.
Yeah, well, see, that's good. Be nice to each other, have each other's backs.
They asked me, how many times was she current? I said, how many times wasn't she? How many times was she current? She was more non-current than current.
Oh.
So,
yeah.
So she asked for it.
Yes.
Are there any legalities with sharing or not sharing things with the landlord?
Question?
Is there any legal issues with sharing information about your tenants?
I think we should have a private one and pass it around the room.
Like employers are reticent to disclose information.
Right. I don't think of anything.
I don't think so, but I think it's very disingenuous if you send somebody over, like you said, that is a total disaster to somebody else, and then they call up and says, hey, this guy is horrible. You know, that's not right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's better to be upfront and answer them, yeah, I would rent them because they do have some issues, and I don't want to discuss them personally, but no, I wouldn't rent them.
If there's anything you're uncomfortable discussing, and I wouldn't discuss personal things. Say, you know, she came to me and she just got through a messy divorce or something like that. You know, the tenant may, you know, not want you talking about their personal lives, but anything that's going to professionally impact them as a business, perfectly fine to ask or perfectly fine to ask.
Ask for a signed release. If you guys feel uncomfortable about giving information, ask for the tenant's signed release. Ask for their application. You know, ask for some sort of proof that they've released you to give this information. You know, the other landlord can email you over their application.
Yep. And your application through the association has a spot on the bottom where they give you consent to run a credit check, run a criminal background check, to contact their employer, to contact their previous landlords, etc.
I find it very unusual. It's maybe 20% of people move out, actually just somebody call me. I even had somebody buy a house and no one on her mortgage even called to see if she lived there for 4 years and paid, you know what I'm saying? So I think it's pretty interesting that no one's ever calling on people that move out.
Do you guys find out about what percentage? You would say at least half of their tenants moving out have somebody call out.
It's very small.
Very small.
Well,
I just had a guy that I asked to move, and he found a place right away, and he's a disaster, but no one ever called me, so I didn't have to deal with it.
you guys at least are being the vanguard for the landlords in the state, and you're asking every time, so we need to help teach the other landlords to do this. All right.
Well, just be glad there's a place for them to go.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. One last point I wanted to bring up is the difference between A and B criteria, okay? You can set up a set of criteria and say, I will rent to you if you do this, all right? And then you can set up and say, if there are these other problems, I will also rent it to you if you do this in addition. So I wouldn't recommend doing this about, say, criminal things, but say if they, oh, here's a good example. If you require that they have been employed for 6 months at the same job, and they've only been employed for 2 months, that's a point where you could write down a B list of criteria and say, all right, you're a bit more of a risk. I will accept you if you give me an extra deposit of X amount, okay? So you just create, you can, if you wish, create an A and B criteria and say, usually the B criteria is going to have an extra deposit attached to it of various sizes. And say, all right, so if you don't meet this standard, if you at least meet this standard, I will still rent to you if you do this, okay?
Extra deposit or extra month's worth of rent?
Yeah, an extra deposit of an extra month's rent. You can even say of, well, for example, pet rent is often this kind. You don't think about it this way, but that's how it is. You say, I will rent to you if you don't have a pet, but if you do have a pet, I will rent to you if you pay this much more in rent every month and you give me an extra deposit. That's exactly this A, B criteria type of a thing. So you can do the same thing with, like I said, employment history, other things, income, or other things like that. Yes.
I don't suppose we can put anything in criteria regarding service animals or comfort pets.
That's not going to be a criteria thing. That's a disability protected status.
Comfort animals aren't disability protected, are they?
They are.
They are. Comfort animals are too, okay.
Can you require a certain size for a comfort animal or not?
They can bring a horse in if they want.
That's a great question. That's something to write your congressman about, because that's the one. Now,
Believe that.
you can put certain rules about animals.
Yeah.
And you might be able to say, I'm not going to allow animals over a certain weight to live inside the unit. But that's something that, if you come across that, call us. If it's going to be something unusual. If they request an unusual comfort animal, contact us, and then we'll tell you to contact an attorney.
The home constructor.
Because we have had in the state chickens, for example, approved as a comfort animal, or actually as a psychological therapy animal for boys with autism. Other psychiatrists prescribe, and apparently work great for them. But that's a case where the landlord needed to talk to their attorney to make sure everything was done. If it's just a simple dog or a cat, you already know how to handle it, then I would
What's
say,
a Saint Bernard?
yeah. If it's Saint Bernard, then in the back.
Just a quick question. I'm really allergic to a lot of animals, and so I've had a lot of people come with their comfort animals or whatever. They have all their paperwork for their animals. And I've told them no. I guess I haven't gotten in trouble yet. But, I mean, can I, on my grounds of, hey, I got to do maintenance on the property, I'm pretty allergic to dogs and cats,
Yeah.
can I personally?
So here's what you do in that case. First, write your congressman to get allergies listed as a disability. Second, you tell them, look, I have a severe allergy. I will have to pay somebody else extra in order to do the maintenance. I'm going to have to pay extra when you move out to thoroughly clean the place. That's going to be charged at you when you leave and when the maintenance is done. You cannot charge any extra up front. But if any animal, whether it's a service animal or a comfort animal, you have to let them in. Give them a chance. That's what the law is. Give them a chance. But if the animal does damage or creates a disturbance, then you can charge for it, or you can evict for it.
Can we ask them for some sort of proof or evidence or what justifies your comfort animal?
You get a reasonable accommodation request form from us, and then get the contact information for their medical provider, and then you send it to the doctor, and the doctor sends
We've
it.
got a form for that?
We do. It's available on the website, or we can give it to you here.
So if the neighbor complains about the comfort dog next
The noise?
door,
Yeah.
the noise?
Sure. Yeah, you give them a 3-day notice to comply, because they have to ensure that their neighbor has reasonable enjoyment of their property, and they also have to keep it, their property in good condition. So yeah, totally. So you don't have to accept their behavior. You just have to accept the animal's presence and give it a chance. And then if it does any damage or does any disturbances, then you can evict them for it.
How much damage or disturbance can get them out? What's the line?
Let us know.
If you're just trying to get them out, then you might get in trouble. But if there's a serious issue, if you have a serious question, talk to your attorney about it. But if it's an obvious thing that the dog is barking all night long, then just give them a 3-day comply notice. They promise to stop the dog from barking. The next time it barks, you give them another 3-day comply notice. The next time it barks, you give them a 3-day nuisance notice, they leave.
Get your other tenant to write a statement to you.
Yeah, and you need
You know,
witness.
so that you have your witness.
But if you're really gonna try that, you
Petition for the
want
neighbors.
an attorney.
Okay.
All right, so we've gotten off track quite a bit, but that's always a fun conversation. We now have Megan from Western Reporting to do how to read a credit score.
Just wanted to get back and say either good or either bad.
Unfortunately, you guys, yeah, that'd be great. I am much more boring, so I apologize. But I'm Megan from Western Reporting. By a show of hands, how many are using our services? How are we doing?
Good?
Good? Any problems? Anything?
Just one issue about the changing of passwords.
Password, yeah,
That, I mean, I travel a lot and sometimes I'm in third world countries and I'm trying to do credit reports for my, and I can't access it.
I
have to
It's
call
absolutely
regular.
the pits when you're in China to try to call you.
You know what? I completely understand. I completely feel your pain. Unfortunately, that is federally regulated and mandated.
Well, I know that maybe changing them is, but there may possibly be a way to do it that you could do it in another country and not make it so difficult. That's all.
You know what? We're actually, basically, there is a 3.0 version of the system coming out. And it is going to be able to address the username and password issue and hopefully a much more user-friendly environment where they will still have to be changed as per federal regulations, but hopefully it'll be done in a much more happy way.
Okay.
So hopefully that will be good.
And also, I was talking to someone, they said they're going to change it to where the person that's applying can pay for it, right? So you don't have to pay for it?
That is correct. There is, this is kind of something that was going to come up at the end, but I'm glad you brought it up. Western Reporting is going to be introducing a new product called QuickLease Pro, and this is actually kind of the perfect thing for those of you who are getting your rental criteria together. It's going to be coming out in September or October. Basically what this product is going to allow you guys to do is give you an online application that will allow, even if you don't have a website already, it will give you guys an online application. It will allow your tenant to go online to that online application. You guys can list your rental criteria right there online. Your applicant will actually have to hit I have read and understand your rental criteria at the bottom, where they will then go through your online application and then they can pay for the background check online using their credit card. So hopefully this will help you guys out immensely, you know, not coming out of your credit cards, not having to actually collect payment from your applicants anymore. So hopefully that will be a great thing for you. And the best part, and my favorite personal part about the system, is that will also allow you guys to generate your lease forms, the Utah Apartment Association lease, online with a click of a button. And it will pre-draw all of your applicants' information straight into the lease. So it's a really exciting system, and it will be coming out in September, October. So really cool. It's going to be really fun.
Will they see the results?
No, you guys see it all. So the only thing your applicant sees is the online application and paying for it with their credit card. That's it. So it'll be really fun.
What's the fee?
It'll be the same $25, and then to cover the credit card processing that we have to cover on our end, it'll just be a little bit more for the applicant. So it'll be $30 instead of $25. They pay it, not you. So it'll be a great thing. So to kind of get started on the wonderful how to read a credit report, this is super fun, guys. We came up with a brand new version for today's meeting because the old how to read a credit report wasn't nearly as visually friendly, shall we say. So we're going to start off at the top, and basically, before we kind of really delve into the ins and outs of the credit report, one of the things that I really wanted to hit on is please never, ever, ever use just looking at the credit score only to make a decision. And I want to tell you guys why. We had one of our clients call up from Texas, and she's one of my longtime clients, absolutely one of my favorite people in the world. Unfortunately, she decides to look just at the credit score to make her rental decision. She doesn't look at the criminal, she doesn't look at anything. Well, she called me up the other day and she said, Megan, I had this person and they had an 823 credit score and they were perfect. And then I rented to them. And I said, okay, well, what happened? And she said, well, I found out they were drug dealers. And I said, okay, well, let me pull up the report. And I said, honey, it said that they were drug dealers in the report. You should have looked down at the bottom. And she said, oh. So, main thing, guys, when you guys are looking at the credit score, please be aware that there is more to your background screening report than just a credit score. So we're going to go over and talk about some of the things that will hopefully help you guys make your decision other than just the credit score. So basically, credit scores, if you look at the very top at the number 1 button, they range from 300 all the way up to 850, okay? So basically, anybody can have a reason why their credit score isn't higher. So if you look right below the credit score of 528 from Mr. Hank Mess here, you're going to see some reasons why his credit score isn't higher. Well, guess what? Even if you had an amazing credit score of 823, you're going to have a reason why your credit score isn't higher. So if you look at these reasons, serious delinquency in public record or collection filed, level of delinquency on accounts, time since delinquency is too recent or unknown. Okay, well guess what? Anybody can have some of these reasons because they don't have a perfect score. And I have never seen an 850 credit score, and I've worked at Western Reporting for 10 years now. So probably not going to happen anytime soon. So what I'm saying here is, please do not take these reasons too seriously, okay? Just kind of look at them, glance at them, and then move right on. Now we're going to come down and look at the actual trade lines and actually kind of see how to look at the actual bulk of the credit report. What's important about this and what isn't. If you look at the button number 3, it's going to kind of tell you, hey, who is Hank Mess owing money to? And the first guy is Countrywide, the next one's WF Fin Accept. Well, what the crap does that mean? Doesn't really matter, he owes money to somebody. And then WF Financial Bank. These are all people that he owes money to. These are considered to be trade lines. So in other words, if I go open an account at RC Willey, I'm going to have what's known as a trade line here. So it's going to be put right there on this piece of paper. Going to the next column right over, you're going to see opening date and months reviewed. So that is basically, when did they open that account? When did that account actually start up? So if I go down to RC Willey and I open an account in January, that's going to be my opening date. My months reviewed, however, can be shorter than my opening date. Why do you guys think a reason for that is? Anybody? Okay.
You open and then you don't pay until later, or?
Kind of. So if I open a credit card account or something with RC Willey in January, so here's January over here, well, it's going to take some time for that information to get to the credit bureau, okay? It might take 2 or 3 months, in fact. So let's say February, March, okay, and finally they start reporting to the credit bureau over here in March. So in other words, they might miss a couple of months of credit history. So if it's a shorter amount of time and they've only reviewed me for 2 or 3 months here, don't get alarmed. It's part of the actual credit bureau's actual history. It's fine. The bigger thing to worry about here is the last reported date. Just like I was saying, not every creditor reports to the credit bureau every month. They don't just say, hey, every single creditor that I have is going to report to TransUnion on the 15th. It really varies by the type of account it is. So if you look at the reported date on the actual credit history, it's gonna tell you when that was last reported. So if it's not a recent date, if it's something that was 2 years ago, that's a really old account. Maybe you shouldn't be looking at it or paying a lot of attention to it. The most important thing on this particular section, or the area that I really look at, is the high credit and the balance section of this. That's number 6 and 7. So again, I'm going to use RC Willie as an example. If I open a credit line for $500, and if I don't pay RC Willie for my beautiful lamp that I just bought, and I don't make any payments on it, I'm past due, I go over my limit, I have balances that are piling up, I'm going to be over my limit, right? So what does that mean? My balance can actually be over my high credit. So if you have a balance in number 7 that is higher than number 6, that is a problem. That is a big problem right there. So that is something that I would definitely look for and watch out for. Of course, anything in number 8 in the past due amount is bad. So definitely watch out for that. Historical times past due, and I know this is really boring, people. Stay with me. It's not really a fun topic, so trust me, I know.
What about people with past due medical bills?
Past due medical bills generally will fall down into the collections area of the report. Those are generally not considered trade lines because it's not actually a credit balance that is open. That it's not a trade line. It's not something that you're applying for credit with a hospital on.
Okay. The other thing is, you run into someone and say, oh, my spouse and I just divorced and the spouse trashed my credit. You look at the credit report and you go, yeah, the credit's trashed.
How do you tell?
Yeah, how do you
see
tell?
that? You know, I actually had that happen to me. My husband, unfortunately, had some issues of that nature himself, and he went a little crazy and ended up passing away. So it does happen, and there are spouses out there who do wreck their other spouse's credit history. Unfortunately, there is not a way on a credit report to tell. The only way for a spouse to go and get that off their credit legitimately is to fight it with the credit bureau or initiate a dispute. So basically what they have to do is go and pull a copy of their credit report, generally on like annualcreditreport.com is the government sponsored site, and then they have to actually say, here is proof that my spouse did this, not me. Unfortunately, state law and federal law says that when you're married, it's joint debt. So there's not a lot that a spouse can do about it in most cases.
So you either do a trust me or you turn them down.
That is why prenuptial and postnuptial agreements are a good thing.
No, but as a landlord, if they say it's their spouse that trashed the credit, and you can't know.
You can't know until they actually go and dispute it with the credit bureau or are in the process of disputing it. If they are in the process of disputing it, they can actually put a note on their credit file saying, hey, you know, I am disputing these trade lines or these collections for these reasons. And if they have a note like that on their credit report, you will see it on their credit file. Generally, most consumers or most people don't take the time to do that. And when they don't, what do you do?
Could he get a cosigner?
Yes.
Or a higher deposit.
Yeah,
So that'd be fine.
or 6 months rent in advance.
And that kind of goes back to the A, B criteria, you know, that you have, and that's where you really need a written policy to handle those types of situations. So kind of getting back to the credit report, one of the easiest ways to kind of see if a person has, to kind of put it bluntly, with the recession, everybody had bad credit, right? Everybody just kind of went down the cracker. Yours was probably perfect, but you know, a lot of tenants really had a problem with their credit. So what you're really trying to look for is how did they recover after the problem, whatever that problem was. How did they recover after their spouse screwed up their credit? How did they recover after they lost a job? How did they recover after the divorce? Well, how can you see that on a credit report? That's kind of hard, right? Well, one of the ways that you can see that is by looking at historical times past due. And that's under number 9. The way that you're going to look at this is you're going to see, okay, this event where my spouse screwed up my credit, well, for me, that was back in 2009. Okay, so if that happened to me in 2009, well, what have I personally done since 2009 to fix my credit? So I can look at that and see, since 2009, have I had any historical times past due? Have I paid my car payment on time since then? Have I had any credit card late payments since then? And I'm going to be able to see that using that section. Okay? Another great thing is in the present status, number 11. You can kind of just go down that list and see, as agreed, as agreed, as agreed. If they're all as agreed, well, guess what? They're probably paying everything on time. If they're not, probably a problem. Okay? The next section is number 13, and that's public records. If they have anything in this section whatsoever, that's not a good thing. Things that are going to fall into this section are judgments, bankruptcies, liens, tax liens. Anything in this section whatsoever is not good for you, okay? Especially if it has not been released or discharged. So for example, on this report, if you're looking at this bankruptcy right here, this Chapter 7 bankruptcy, you can see the status in the right-hand corner and it says discharged. That means the bankruptcy has actually been released. It's gone from all the way through the filing of it to the judge looking at the actual assets of Hank Mess and saying, okay, you can do this and you can pay back this guy and you can pay back this guy, and now you're actually bankrupt and now the file's actually been released. If it has not been released or discharged, they still owe that money to somebody. And especially with your bigger tax liens, that's a really big problem. The state can come in at any time